our first panel. I'm very excited about that. And it is called Reimagining Higher Education. And I think all of us who look back at our higher education and we look forward to what has to come and we look at the different world we live in right now, it really is about reimagining it. And what are we doing? What are our expectations and where are we going for the future? And the moderator for this session is a gentleman who's been an innovative ed tech entrepreneur in many ways. The former dean of the Global Studies at Long Island University in New York. Also the founder and vice president of the international educational mobile web application Admission Table. I'm really delighted and so happy to welcome now to join us to be our moderator for this session, Reimagining Higher Education. So please, a very warm welcome for Duleep Deosthale. He'll be with us in just a moment. And indeed, here he is. Duleep, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this panel.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for those very kind words to start off this conference. That was just what we needed. Perfect send off in terms of where we are going. And I also wanted to appreciate the words of Ambassador Salama in terms of touching on all the issues related to, what is needed. And those are some of the things I think we are going to be talking about in the course of this session, but also in many of the sessions that are following through. So thank you very much. And we will get started with reimagining education. And we're going to start it off in terms of trying to find out what is it that is needed. And we have some exciting panelists ahead of us. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists and bring them on board, and we'll get to know them and talk with them. We have Dr. Laila Calzafadi, who is the first woman to be selected as president of a major co-ed Saudi university. She's a distinguished intellectual and executive who has worked for over 20 years in business development, business consultancy, strategic leadership, and project management. Lilac is very, very proactive in empowering women, promoting entrepreneurship, and helping startups. She serves as steering and advisory boards of several organizations and has contributed towards more than 50 research papers in conferences. Most importantly, she is very, very passionate about integrating research, learning, and industry. So good morning, Dr. Laila Alsafadi. Welcome.
Good morning, Duleep, and thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you.
All right, and I'd like to introduce now Milena Rubell. She teaches at Harvard University, entrepreneurship and innovation, strategic management, essentials of leadership, and project management. In addition to her faculty responsibilities, Milena is also an entrepreneur, the founder and director of Vestra Education, which is a vision to providing learning opportunities that add value to the academic, personal, and professional growth of each participant. Vestra designs learning programs that inspire students to envision a future of excellence and great possibilities. Welcome, Milena.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very
interesting conversation we'll have here.
And we move on to our next panelist, and Dr. Robert Mauro is the executive director of the Irish Institute and founding director of the Global Leadership Institute at Boston College. At the Irish Institute, he worked with the US Department of State, where he designed and implemented professional education programs for developing senior leaders in Ireland and Northern Ireland. 5 years ago, he founded the Global Leadership Institute, which delivers high-impact applied executive education programming in leadership and strategy for developing senior leaders from around the world, reaching more than 3,000 participants, including South America and the Gulf Cooperation Council states. Welcome, Dr. Robert Mora.
Thank you, Duleep. It's great to be here. Good morning, everyone.
And finally, we have Dr. Riad Hamza. He's the president of the University of Bahrain, a professor of environmental biotechnology at the Arab Gulf University, and a member of the Council of Higher Education in the Kingdom of Bahrain. He was involved in the establishment of the Arabian Gulf University way back when it started in 1984, and established and directed numerous new programs in various scientific and educational fields. He earned his PhD in biochemistry and zymology in 1984 from the University of Houston in the US. Welcome, Dr. Riad Hamza. Dr. Hamza? Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to get started. Well, these are, as both our speakers have started off talking about unprecedented times, it's only natural I start off also saying the same thing. Indeed, unprecedented times in all aspects of our personal and professional lives. And we are all trying to strike the right balance. The pandemic has forced us to adapt to changes in a matter of weeks, which in normal academic circles would have taken a fair amount of time. And I will not elaborate on how much time all those meetings would have taken. But surprisingly, we have all come out rather well with very few known glitches. In the short span of time, we went from face to face to virtual, not as a test, but as a norm. Our priority has been to continue educating our students and make sure that all functions related to running a university stayed on track. And all of us were unsure of how long this will last, and we continue to be a little unsure, although we seem to be getting there in some form or fashion. So against this backdrop of the last 18 months, in a certain sense, I'm going to begin my first question, and which is the title of this session, the obvious. What do we mean by reimagining education, and how or what it should focus on? In this case, what is it that we are looking at when we talk about reimagining education? It's a word that has been used a fair amount of time in this past 18 months. So my question to all of you is, how do you see reimagining education? And Lilac, I'll start off with you.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Duleep. And I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this very important event. I'm really happy to be part of this remarkable panel. So going back to your question, I think that the education of the future should focus on offering learners access to immersive, engaging, and flexible learning at the learner's pace and place. So learning should be, or learners should be able to study on the go and in multiple models. So switching seamlessly between on-campus, blended, online, and could be even mobile phones to suit their lifestyle and to fit learning with the work, with their day-to-day activities. And when we talk about higher education in specific, I think they need to focus on accelerating learning and moving towards offering learners a greater control and mobility. So enabling, for instance, students to mix and match degrees from different institutes, to share, stack, discover, and match credits and competencies with the opportunities that may advance their personal, academic, and professional goals. I also think that universities in specific should focus on becoming truly ecological, coming closer in a two-way partnership with the industry and with education entrepreneurs just like yourself to co-design and co-create qualification and solution that responds to the industries and to give learners more power and ownership in their learning journey. In fact, I think that every learner should have his or her custom made for me kind of learning path. And to further imagine education, I think that education should be a free air available for every learner on the planet to empower him or her to achieve their academic and professional and ultimately their personal ambitions.
Thank you very much. I think you've covered all the bases, but I am still going to ask all our colleagues. Bob, what do you think?
Well, it's been an interesting experience. I think if you think back to the start of the pandemic here in the United States, it was a pretty panicked time for the students, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, people didn't understand how COVID worked yet fully. I do remember the day that we decided to go remote in March of, I guess, 2020, and students were walking across campus with their boxes and packing up to go home, and really nobody understood when they might be back. The remainder of that academic year for us was online. And that was a little bit of a challenge for people. No one really knew what Zoom was. Some faculty had been using a mixed method, sometimes an online tool. For the snowstorms that we get here in the Northeast, you might miss a day and you might do it, but it wasn't a widespread practice. In those few months, I think people began to understand how they can teach with impact online. But a school like Boston College, I think, realized through that period also how important consistency was. So we made a big commitment to return to campus, and I think there's a whole class of universities that have doubled down on what we were doing beforehand. So rather than the COVID experience representing a reconstruction and a revolution of the institution, what it meant was highlighting some of the themes and consistencies we were focused on beforehand. And that was maintaining a commitment to a valuable in-person experience that went beyond skills development. It went to the development of the whole student as a functioning and a productive and a nice citizen. I think also at the institution, it brought out some key elements that we were focused on before. And I think you can see this across higher ed here in the US around diversity and inclusion, and a focus on impact on climate change and innovation. These are things we were already talking about at the institution, and many of our peer institutions were. So I don't think we saw a massive change in what is happening at the undergraduate level. I do think it depends on where you are, either as an institution and where you are in the system, about what the future ought to look like or might look like most productively. We have seen great changes at our graduate level, especially in the professional programming, where skills are a priority, where demand and time of students is a challenge. And so there you've seen, I think, a more consistent approach or a more consistent shift to a virtual possibilities, to on-the-go education, to mixed approaches to education, to controlling or allowing students to control how and when they learn. But like I said, I think it depends on where you are. For me, the experience, I think, has highlighted how little change in some ways there has been through the crisis.
Okay. Very good. Milena, your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me to be here. I think this conversation is really important because it brings different opinions, people from different countries, and that's very beautiful. So I think that now that we have the opportunity now to go beyond what we have done in higher education. Before COVID, we were relying on campus class. I feel that, of course, we are humans. We love the contact with other humans. And I think this will not go away completely. But I think with COVID, proved that we can go beyond the gates of our institution. And we can now rethink how classes are offered, right? We can offer online. We give the flexibility to students to be in person or online. But above all, I think this opened our minds to partner, right, with all the other institutions and go beyond the curriculum, I have to say. Our focus should be, and I think this is definitely my opinion, and how can we use technology to lower the cost of higher education, especially in the United States, because there's been, I have heard, and we have a lot of conversations, how expensive it is to study in the United States. But of course, there's a value, but the cost is being so high and higher. And now our, I think, mission is to, okay, now we have this opportunity to use technology, but using technology, we have to offer a benefit to those who come to our institutions, right? So I think if we do that, if we use technology to the benefits to lower the costs, we'll be able to reach people who are not able to perhaps participate in higher education. And I think this is a very important thing to think about now. Use the resources now that we are pushing to the online learning, which is it's a huge opportunity, and it's been happening a lot in other countries, much more than the United States. I think that we can use this opportunity to benefit a greater amount of people. And that is what I think is how we reimagine, right? Okay, where we are today, how can we use this in our benefits and benefits of others, not just our institution?
Thank you very much. And Riyad, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me with this distinguished panelist, and it gives me a great honor to be here with you. I think the need or the attempts to reimagining higher education has not been simply the result of the pandemic, though it made it urgent and more obvious for all the stakeholders of higher education. Even before the pandemic, we have been witnessing changing variables on societies and economies, the fourth industrial revolution, energy and scarcity of natural resources, climate change, conflicts, unemployments, and so on. This period of disruptions, I think, has given us a moment to evaluate the need for changes and reimagining in higher education, and not just the changes in delivery. Focus in higher education should be on ensuring the students' mastery of their defined learning objectives, and not solely on the completion of certain numbers of credit hours. And the concept of reimagining education deals with the need to develop new methods for providing students with the knowledge and skills they will need for lifetime learning. They must be given opportunity for individual intellectual discovery. In addition, what the students bring to their education in their own right must be taken into consideration, including experience they have previously had in, for instance, the workplace. Students are the core of the university, and providing them with the skills they will need to succeed after achieving their degrees must be the most important focus for the university. Assessment is where I hope to see the biggest changes in reimagining higher education, a move away from traditional high-stakes final exams to a more balanced and diverse way of assessing student knowledge for knowledge's sake, to be replaced by real-world assessment and the demonstration of knowledge application in multiple settings, while examinations will be replaced by projects, portfolios, research undertaking, and high-quality internship. In addition to delivery modes, it's obvious for all of us that reimagining higher education institute will change numerous aspects of the university operations, including quality assurance, accreditations, funding, partnership, student training, student extracurriculum, which is very important, admissions, and governance. So all these things really will make all our university very busy, I hope, in the next era. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, all the things that you have mentioned, every one of you, I think the biggest challenge is going to be for universities to set those timelines. Yes, we are talking about change and what needs to be done and all these different areas. Traditionally, universities have been known to respond slowly. So the question is, how quickly will change come in as we think about reimagining, or whichever way we decide to go in direction we choose? The question will be the speed with which we implement and execute many of these things that need to be developed. So while we are thinking, we have to also run parallel with the idea of this is impacting the next generation. How quickly can we bring this in? But in line with that, I mean, obviously there have been, we've talked about how do you see it? And I'm sure that each one of you has had a significant amount of challenge this past year. So I'm going to ask you very briefly to talk about just one challenge that you have faced over the past 18 months, which was significant, that you would like to share with all of us. So let me begin with Riyad.
Okay. Well, this questions would have been easier, much easier, if you said 100 challenges.
No.
Not
That's
just
why I asked about.
I guess shifting to emergency online education required us to completely reinvent how to run campus operations. We at the University of Bahrain began important aspects of our digital transition 5 years ago. However, with the pandemic, there were a number of key issues to be addressed, which concerned health and safety, student experience, continuum of teaching, and maintaining quality and standards, campus operation, and so on. But especially communication. I think a plan for good internal communication strategy was needed to disseminate promptly adapted policy to all staff and students using a variety of accessible channels. Constant communication was critical, with daily meetings, ensuring consistency across the work streams. The first thing we had to do, of course, was to make sure that staff and students were prepared to use the online facility. For example, we worked with even local organization to provide 2,500, let's say, laptops to our some of our students. Quality of education and student assessment were major challenges that created an urgent demand to rethink some aspect of higher education, and was the need to ensure that the pandemic would not cause delays in completion of their studies.
Okay.
So the most important thing on a daily basis was what's happening on campus in terms of day-to-day mechanisms of running the university. And I would like to say an important challenge was to demonstrate to everyone, students, staff, and society at large, that steps has been taken to ensure that, and in spite of dealing with glitches here and there, that it continues to be the business as usual, and that the university is ready to make adequate solution as we go on. So communication plan was very important.
All right. Thank you. Well, from one president to another president, Lilac, what do you have to share?
Well, in addition to what Professor Riyad mentioned, because I think this challenge in specific was shared across all the universities, I think we as a university, driven by the economic and market changes, I think the change in the role of the university for us was a challenge. So universities were set from the very beginning to be thought leaders and drivers of long-term impact and in a stable career path job market. The university were never designed from the very beginning to operate and change curriculums and introduce new programs at the market pace. So now the universities are expected to prepare learners for a fast changing and unpredictable world. This definitely requires change in our business model and operating model, as well as the learning model. So I agree indeed that this is a new important role universities need to play. However, we still need the legacy thought leaders in various fields. And also, as an electronic university, I think the challenge was the global ecosystem that was biased towards traditional education. Although COVID-19 has changed the overall perception and increased the credibility of online learning, but still, in my opinion, a lot need to happen. So going forward, I think we need to believe that for a diversified economy, we need to promote diversified universities and diversified learning models. Um, in the past few years, we've seen in Saudi Arabia, for instance, we've been taking numerous policy reforms and initiatives to foster innovation while ensuring quality in education. And a few weeks ago, all those human capital development initiatives has been further framed under a dedicated and a comprehensive vision to ensure it is achieved. So I think with policymakers' support, there is a lot to be done by higher education institutes and education entrepreneurs to embrace innovation taking place and to retrofit the current systems of higher education for a new era of digital learning and lifelong learning.
All right. Thank you. Milena, one challenge.
Well, I think the greatest one exactly, yeah. The only challenge, the only one, I think, the greatest one actually, it's the being creative, right? When you are with students, they're online at work, they're online for classes, and we survey our students in our class every week. Actually, one thing that we heard from them over and over is the lack of interaction with other students, right? Because in class you have this, you can talk with someone, you can approach them, but online, if we don't manage, the faculty, if we don't manage that well, they don't have that opportunity. So that's one thing that we start thinking about. Not just actually me. We had a conference at Harvard like 1 or 2 weeks ago, exactly to talk about how can we move forward, right? How can we be creative and teach in ways that we will be able to engage the students and bring them to participate. So I think it's just the creativity is the challenge, right? And as we move forward, we have to think about other ways how to teach.
Okay, so from a faculty perspective to an administrative perspective, Robert.
Yeah, it's hard not to kind of echo yes and everything that I've heard. I think in the very early days of the pandemic, there was a quip from an NPR comedy show, and they said we're all spending the weekend trying to figure out how to live without breathing. And so that really points right to the operational challenge that you have in delivering higher education, where students are close together in dorms. When you have an aerosolized pandemic. I think, though, interestingly, I think the biggest challenge throughout has been maintaining an ability for people to connect with the mission of the university, which is around at Boston College and other similar institutions, that formative education. It's just not about the skills delivery. It's just not about the relationship between the faculty member and the student. It's about how the faculty member is understanding what they're doing. How does the staff member understanding what they're doing? What are we doing as an institution? And getting them to be able to replicate that feeling that yes, we are working towards a better society through our educational model. And we have to do it in a way where we're dispersed around the world. And so many of the things that we used to do to, that generated those feelings, that allowed us to actualize our work around creating a better society, can't be done. We can't go on a project where we go and build homes, for deprived communities. We can have a project where we take our students of education into underfunded school systems, because they don't exist right now, because they're all dispersed remotely. And so that's, I think, been the biggest challenge, is maintaining that focus on the mission, not in the way that people behave, but in the way that people actually consume it across the campus. And I think it's important, not just, look, the university's here for the students are paying the tuition, but everyone needs to be able to, participate in that project. Otherwise, the institution itself, it doesn't function.
Right. Thank you very much. Lilac, you mentioned something which I'm going to start and take off for my next question. You used the term market speed, and I really liked it in terms of how and what we need to be responding. And I'm kind of contextualizing it with a reaction on the part of many, and many of you have suggested. A lot of young minds during this pandemic have opted to become entrepreneurs, or quite simply, have felt that higher education is a little out of touch with their way of thinking. So the question is, what is it that higher education institutions need to do to be more inclusive, more nurturing, more supportive, more, all these things of a generation which thinks rather differently from the conventional approach to what we have always looked at education or the role of education. Lilac, I would like to direct that to you.
Well, thank you, Duleep. So let me tell you that in SEU, our university, the majority of our students are actually non-traditional students. So they come from varying experience, and they often juggling family and business and their own startups and work responsibilities while completing their studies. So I kind of find those non-traditional students to be entrepreneurial learners. They demand more personalized, and they demand more control over their own learning pace and path. And to them, learning is or learning no longer need a fixed time schedule and inflexible academic boundaries. So in order for us to attract entrepreneurs, whether we're talking about business entrepreneurs or learners entrepreneurs, we believe that we need to be entrepreneurial ourselves. So in the university, we start rethinking our learning model, and now we clearly articulate what distinct value do we bring to the learners and to the wider society. As part of the post-pandemic strategy, now we have made a clear strategic choices about whom we want to serve, what to provide, and how to provide. So we're really acting just like we're building a new startup. We're also leveraging technology. So we've been talking about technology. We are leveraging technology to help learners to have flexible, immersive, and personalized learning journey. And we are continuously keeping an eye on the emerging alternative learning options, and clearly trying to differentiate ourselves from our peers and our competitors. Also, in order to stay relevant, we are leveraging our products and our assets and adapting them more to the needs of the target audience into new products and new services. So now we're talking about short diploma, we're talking about interdisciplinary programs. And I think also another important aspect to help us become entrepreneurial ourselves is that we are focusing further on removing all the silos and becoming physically and virtually connected to the broader ecosystem and having the industry as part of our DNA. So overall, I think we as a university are becoming entrepreneurial ourselves and adopting a startup mindset where we continuously sense the market needs and quickly try to test those solutions before we scale it up. And I think integrating agility, trial and fail, and lessons learned as part of our success journey is really part of becoming entrepreneurial and attracting entrepreneurs to the university.
Okay, and Robert, what is happening at Boston College in this area?
Well, it depends what the program is, and if it's a graduate program or an undergraduate program. At the graduate level, there's quite a lot of collaboration, especially in the professional programming. If you take a look at our Woods College, which is our professional school, between the university and the industry themselves, in those kinds of settings. Industry work quite closely to explain what the needs are. So if you take for a close look at what is happening, say, in our cybersecurity studies program, it is really about trying to address the current and future challenges that industry has in that space. And we in that program in particular, our faculty members are often drawn from the corporate world and from the state institutions, the security institutions. So there's a high impact programs that can be developed that work with industry. At the undergraduate level, it's slightly different. Going back to my comments at the beginning, some of the themes that we were stressing here already at Boston College have been maybe highlighted to a certain degree. History continues to remain the study of history continues to be the study of history. The study of English literature continues to be the study of English literature, except that, now we were talking about things maybe we hadn't spoken about as much before. And there's been a greater need to focus on, climate justice or inclusion and diversity, questions around here, especially at Boston College, about what the good society, what is the good society, and how do we help to create it. I mean, these are things we were talking about before. There's been an increased urgency around it that has been, generated by, in part by, the disparities that we've seen around COVID. And so, I think those are some of the things that we have focused quite a lot on here at the institution. We continue to have a focus on that in-person experience. So, and everything that goes with it. Here at the university this year, we're open to completely. There are no COVID restrictions, other than the fact that there's a vaccine mandate. And that's how, we've enabled students to gather and work together. That means that we continue to have, our extracurricular activities. Our labs continue to run as normal, where they maybe couldn't have run that way before the vaccine was available. And we tried to focus on student well-being and health. We realized that the remote circumstances were difficult, that not everyone learned in the same circumstances, from where they were sheltering in place. It was quite different for people. Some people didn't have good access to Wi-Fi. Some people didn't have their own room. And so, and there were so many other challenges as well that people experienced in their homes. So I think, through this process, there's been an increased intention with the faculty and staff at the institution around, well-being and working with one another in a way that it's, kind and facilitates, people's, social and emotional needs as well.
All right. Thank you. We've been talking a lot about, how to look at universities and the role of technology and everything related to it, and, expanding the access in terms of students. So there is a question which has come in, and I'm going to direct it to Riyad. What are some of the challenges, when it comes to teaching courses that have emphasis on lab work? And the reason I'm directing it to you, because you have a science background. So how do you, when we talk about many of the things that you have mentioned, all of you, using technology and all the different attributes to it in terms of reaching a larger population, engaging them, how do we accommodate so many of these academic disciplines which are lab work driven?
Yes. Well, this is really one of the big challenges that goes along with the online learning. It differs from a discipline to a discipline, and also it differs when it comes to the size of the classrooms, whether you're doing experiments with a class that has 25 students, or maybe a postgraduate class with 5 students, and so on. But the university used a lot of simulation. For example, we are in the process of having a simulation lab for our nursing department that take care of a lot of the practices that were used actually even before the pandemic. Things like that, we are trying to minimize the difficulty for making sure that the students master what they need to do. We're also doing, of course, a lot of videos, and also we're trying to use videos even for students doing the experiments, but that might work only for a smaller number. So this will continue, I think, to be a challenge. And at the same time, this is also the training that we have. We have for many of our specialties, we have training at different institutions. So, it's not easy to have large numbers to do training in different institutions, but also we try to work with that, minimizing the number of the groups to a smaller number, and also to use the online demonstrations as much as we can, if we can do that, and so on. I think this will continue to be a challenge, but the answer will be different from different courses and different size of students.
Okay, well, thank you. There's another question, and I'm going to direct this to Milena. A lot of questions. I mean, you've been talking about the student experience from a faculty perspective and being in class and teaching. So the question is, how, ideas on how do we create a high quality student experience?
I think that what we are doing, actually, we are asking them. We survey our students, we check in with them. But I think, as I mentioned before, we are all humans. We want to interact with humans, right? Even though we are online. So we create activities and think outside of the box, of course, and how to enable this in class through online learning, right? Not just the projects. They do have to, at least in our class, they do have to work together outside of class, but in class, there was a need and actually demand for interacting with each other. So we create group discussions and large group discussions, and also we try to be less boring, I say, because when you are in the computer, we are all separated. We tend to be lonely, right? But if the conversation is active, it's engaging, then of course you're more, you participate a little bit more. So we are trying to find ways to engage students in different conversations, breakout groups, bring different subjects and let them actually participate more than just being like consuming information, but also contributed to the conversation. I think it's active way of learning. It's very important when you do online learning.
Right. Thank you. One of the things that we have seen as a result of the pandemic and everything that has happened, and students not being in class and trying to connect remotely, and this is across K through 12 and higher education. So what is the role in terms of governments? A lot of governments have become involved in terms of making sure about related to the delivery of education, so that each generation, each of these years, continue with their education. And at the same time, there is industry. So how can these three areas, education, industry, and governments, work together in a certain sense, reframing the role of education and the responsibility of universities? Laila? What may be happening, say, in Saudi Arabia, for example?
Well, as I mentioned, in Saudi Arabia, we are having the government has been addressing most of the challenges that are happening in education, and in specific, that the traditional 4 years one-size-fits-all learning is no longer relevant, and that we need the lifelong learning is becoming an integral part of the learning journey. So Saudi Arabia has, as I mentioned earlier, had addressed this in a human capital development program that was launched weeks ago with a vision to build a global competitive citizen. So as part of this program vision, it really focuses on increasing the overall education ROI by accelerating learning, by building flexible, resilient education, by improving efficiency and effectiveness, and promoting lifelong learning. And the industry is part of the solution, definitely. And also, under this program, the education is no longer something that happens between K to college and behind walls. To build a global competitive citizen, learning and relearning is a life journey that works hand in hand with the industry from K to retirement. So I think it really started in Saudi Arabia. It started with a country vision to address this challenge, and it will be cascaded later on all the universities. And after this, as a response to this vision, we in SEU were turning our operation into more of a learning accelerator and leveraging our products and assets, as I mentioned, to serve the vision objectives.
Okay,
So
great.
this is yeah.
All right, thank you. And Robert, I'm going to ask you the same question, but from the perspective of somebody who has worked with the State Department and done all these training programs and leadership development things across, Latin America and also in the Gulf. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, it depends on where you are again as an institution and where you are in that institution in your educational journey. Here in the U.S., much of our higher ed system is privatized. Even our public institutions largely draw their funding from private resources. So there tends to be less of a focus on a coordinated industrial educational policy, for instance. You can find that in places. The state of North Carolina does a very good job of that, designing educational programs around, new work. I think the focus and the big institutions here right now is probably around safety, community safety, and then around the loan system and what that is going to be. I mean, obviously that's a future debate here in Massachusetts. One of our senators, Elizabeth Warren, is very keen to address this issue. So I think we'll see more there. When it comes to projects and collaborating with institutions like the State Department, there is, a high degree of collaboration between the institution and the state. And it's about figuring out the policy needs that the U.S. might have and how they can be echoed in educational experiences for those abroad. I think in that situation, it's really incumbent on the institution to explain what the participants in the programs need. Often, the policy desires of the state are in one direction, and they might not interest people who might be sitting in these actual experiences. So to try to marry that up to explain is really vital. And institutions can play a really important role in this capacity because we have an ability to connect with people, to learn what they are saying, to understand what they're saying, and to communicate that back to policymakers and leaders who maybe have their own set of logic that they're operating to, and less of an interest perhaps in, or less of an awareness perhaps, what the needs are on the ground. So it's very important that the institution plays this kind of mediating role, an ability to kind of understand what's happening, and then replicate it, for the policymakers, so they can fund and promote effective policy. If, for instance, it makes little difference to people on the ground, say in Latin America, if U.S. policy, wants to focus on, women's empowerment, for instance, and that's consumed in a different way in Latin America than it might be at the policy level. The policy would be completely ineffectual anyways in that case. So it's about trying to, design programming that actually works for the participants. That is our primary objective always.
Okay, and in the case of Bahrain, Riyad?
Well, this triple helix between industry and institutions and societies, what you started the question with, is very important. It's essential to create partnership with the stakeholders, including the government, private, and educational sectors, in order to develop programs that provide students with the skills necessary to perform their future jobs and to meet the demands of their future employers. So how do we do this? First of all, I guess employers need to have a clear understanding of their future employment opportunity and their skills requirements. What do they have to offer graduates, and in turn, what skills should the graduates bring to the table in order to be hireable? This is an integral part of having an improved labor market intelligence ecosystem. University can then offer and develop programs that are aligned with labor market conditions. This comes through increased employer engagement. Curriculum need to be co-developed in conjunction with the employers so that learning outcomes are relevant to their needs. representation of the private sector and industry should be encouraged in different levels of the university councils and committees to oversee curriculum development and training, and that's what we have done at the University of Bahrain. University should encourage the employers to mentor students and help them understand the requirements of the work environment. Internship, also, for example, are key part of developing employability skills to ensure that students gain necessary skills and develop a positive attitudes towards employment. More multidisciplinary programs could also be introduced as the barriers between job sectors become less clear. Entrepreneurship education is also an important aspect of developing students' mindsets to be resourceful and proactive. So there are a lot of measures a university can take to help the skills and qualifications of their students and enable them for to work in industry and to work with industry, if you like.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, we're coming up on time, so before we have just a few minutes, so I'm going to throw one last question to all of you, and that is one last thing that you would like to see as we move ahead. One thing that you would like to see as we move ahead. Anybody wants to start it off? Challenging, isn't it?
I can start. Actually,
Yeah.
I work with students who, the age of going to college, I recruit college students to work for me, and I also work with professionals, right? So I can see this whole array of gap in learning. Like we are talking about so much about skills and abilities needed for the future. We are talking about how to prepare our students, our college students, to the job market. We are seeing education changing, and it's changing a lot, not just because of technology, but I think it's because of what people are seeing in terms of investment and value, right, given by the institutions when they go to college. So I think what I would like to see is more the higher education working together, not just separately, but to offer interdisciplinary courses, but with the mission of preparing this individual to the market, to the work place, right? Because it doesn't matter if you stay in school and you study all these subjects and get A's, right? All your students, they want A, actually, the ones that I work with. But it doesn't matter what you know. If you don't know how to use what you know, the world will not want you, right? We have huge competition today. And the thing is that the students, they spend 4 years, let's say college students, a huge amount of time, and time is money, right? And money. And when they leave college, sometimes they don't know how to solve a complicated problem. Ask the important questions. So I think preparing these students to really not just giving them classes and great grades, but preparing them for
preparing students.
The right.
We have very little time, so I'm going to keep it brief for all the others. If you can just quickly share. Laila?
Yes. So I think my final thought is that today the opportunities to make education more affordable, accessible, and relevant seem limitless. There are a lot yet to be done to embrace innovation taking place. So I think we need to direct more financing, accreditation, models of learning, hiring, and professional development practices need to evolve to retrofit the current system of higher education for a new era of digital learning.
All right. Professor Riyad?
Yes, I also like to see diversity in programs, faculty, and students. Technology means having a global pool of talent and students to draw from. Higher education institutions will be central to large-scale innovation and tackling global issues at both the local and global levels through wider engagement with government and industry.
Okay.
And something which is also very important is research. See research leading the technology as it's done in partnership and with the industry and the private sector. Now, also, we are seeing that institutions becoming so big that they become unresponsive sometimes to students and communities. And they are sometimes left behind by students, by university. So what we need to do is to see more specialized, smaller scale university, and I think that will be more helpful for the students.
Okay.
So there are many things that we would like to see, I'm sure, after all this time with
yes, we
the
have little
pandemic.
time, and I will give that
Yes,
little
I'll
time
leave it to you, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, one last comment?
I think in some way Milena already touched on it. She said that all her students are seeking an A. I think counterintuitively,
Yeah.
if fewer students were chasing that grade and the achievement of that score, they would enjoy the experience more and get more out of the total educational experience. I don't want to suggest to students that you should skip class, but take that opportunity to step out of the achievement race and do the thing that excites you in your time in university, and learn from that. That's invaluable.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. On that note, thank you very much, Dr. Laila Calzafadi, Dr. Riad Hamza, Milena Rubell, and Bob, for your wonderful thoughts and sharing with us this morning. And hopefully you'll be able to stick around. And to all of you listeners and viewers, I hope you have been enjoying this session. And it's time up for us. And I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you.